The air shimmered with an otherworldly glow as the night stretched endlessly across the barren expanse of a forgotten planet. Stars flickered like distant lanterns, their light barely reaching through layers of cosmic dust that veiled the heavens. It was here, amidst ruins older than time itself, that he stood, alone and weary from years spent wandering without purpose. His name meant little in this desolate corner of existence. He had long since abandoned it along with any semblance of identity. He simply existed, surviving on scraps of memories and the faint hope that somewhere beyond these endless dunes lay something worth returning to. The silence around him was oppressive, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind carrying echoes of civilizations lost to time. Each step forward felt heavier than the last, weighed down not just by exhaustion but by the crushing weight of solitude. For years, he had roamed planets uninhabited by life, searching for meaning where none seemed to exist. The landscape shifted, mountains became valleys, oceans turned into deserts, but the emptiness remained constant. There were no voices to fill the void, no faces to remind him what connection once felt like. And yet, despite everything, his instincts told him to keep moving. Perhaps it was stubbornness or perhaps sheer desperation, but deep within him burned a quiet determination to find something, anything, that might make all this wandering worthwhile. He couldn't recall how many sunrises he'd witnessed alone, how many moons had risen and fallen while he trudged onward, aimless yet unwilling to stop. Every breath tasted bitter, every heartbeat echoed louder against the deafening stillness surrounding him. But tonight, something felt different. The usual indifference of the universe seemed fractured, replaced by a strange tension that prickled at the edges of his awareness. He paused, scanning the horizon where shadows danced unnaturally in the dim starlight. A chill crept up his spine, though whether born of fear or anticipation, he couldn't say. Then came the sound. A soft hum, almost imperceptible at first, growing steadily until it resonated through the very ground beneath his feet. It wasn't mechanical, nor entirely natural. It carried a melody both haunting and hypnotic, weaving its way into his thoughts until they unraveled under its pull. Without realizing it, his body began to move toward the source, drawn irresistibly as if some unseen force tugged at his soul. The sensation was unfamiliar yet undeniable, igniting a spark of curiosity that hadn't stirred in years. Whatever awaited him ahead, it promised change, a disruption in the monotony that had defined his existence thus far. And so, with each labored step forward, he braced himself for whatever fate had decided to thrust upon him next. As he reached the crest of a dune, the world below unfolded before him in a surreal tableau. At its center stood a figure bathed in an ethereal luminescence, her presence commanding yet enigmatic. She moved with fluid grace, every gesture deliberate and precise, as though choreographed by forces beyond mortal comprehension. Her form defied description, too perfect to be human, yet too familiar to dismiss outright. Her skin glimmered faintly, catching even the weakest rays of starlight, and her eyes held galaxies within their depths, swirling with colors no prism could replicate. He froze, unable to tear his gaze away. Around her, the air rippled faintly, distorting reality itself as if she existed slightly out of sync with the rest of the universe. Her attire was equally alien, an intricate weave of metallic threads that shimmered like liquid silver, shifting patterns with each subtle movement. Yet there was nothing cold about her appearance. Instead, she radiated warmth, a magnetic allure that seemed to draw the very essence of life toward her. Her voice broke the spell, low and melodic, carrying tones that resonated deep within his chest. "You will be my husband," she declared, her words both a statement and a decree. There was no question in her tone, no room for refusal, only certainty, absolute and unshakable. He blinked, unsure whether he had misheard or misunderstood, but her expression left no doubt. She meant every syllable. For a moment, disbelief warred with awe inside him. This creature, this being who seemed plucked from the fabric of dreams themselves, had chosen him, not because of strength, intelligence, or merit, but simply because she willed it so. The absurdity of the situation struck him hard, threatening to topple whatever fragile composure he still clung to. He opened his mouth to speak, to protest or inquire further, but no sound emerged. His throat tightened, choked by emotions he couldn't begin to articulate. She took a step closer, her movements impossibly smooth, and extended one hand toward him. Her fingers tapered elegantly, tipped with nails that gleamed like polished obsidian. As she neared, the air grew warmer, charged with an energy that made his skin prickle. He instinctively recoiled, but her gaze locked onto his, pinning him in place. Those endless eyes bore into him, reading truths he hadn't dared confront, unraveling the tangled threads of his soul with a glance. Why? He finally managed, his voice hoarse and trembling. The question sounded feeble even to his own ears, drowned out by the enormity of her presence. But she didn't falter, didn't hesitate. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that bordered on reverence. "You are unique among your kind," she said softly, her voice laced with a cadence that felt ancient and timeless. "A wanderer without tether, untouched by chains of loyalty or ambition. You carry no burdens save those you choose to bear." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. "I have searched countless worlds, traversed eons of existence, seeking one such as you." He stared at her, trying to reconcile her explanation with the absurdity of the proposal. "But he trailed off, gesturing vaguely at himself, at the tattered remnants of his clothing, the dirt-streaked skin, the unkempt hair. "I'm nothing special." Her lips curved into a smile that was neither condescending nor pitying, just deeply knowing. "Special is irrelevant. What matters is potential. And yours, it calls to me." Before he could respond, the landscape around them shifted subtly, as if responding to her will. The sands beneath their feet stilled, forming a smooth, glassy surface that reflected the stars above. She stepped closer still, closing the distance between them until mere inches separated their bodies. Her scent enveloped him then, clean and sharp, like ozone after a storm, mingled with something indescribably sweet. It filled his senses, clouding his thoughts and making rationality feel like a distant memory. "You do not need to understand now," she murmured, her breath warm against his cheek. "Only trust that this union shall transcend the boundaries of your limited perception. Together, we will forge a legacy that reshapes destinies." Legacy? The word echoed in his mind, hollow and foreign. How could someone like him, a man who had long since surrendered to insignificance, ever contribute to anything remotely resembling greatness? Doubt clawed at the edges of his resolve, urging him to retreat, to flee back into the safety of anonymity. Yet something deeper, something primal, rooted him to the spot. Whether it was fear, fascination, or something else entirely, he couldn't say. All he knew was that turning away now felt impossible. Her hand rose again, hovering just above his chest, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her palm. "Do you accept?" The question hung suspended, demanding an answer he wasn't ready to give. Time seemed to stretch, elongating each heartbeat into an eternity. And yet, even as uncertainty swirled within him, he found himself leaning ever so slightly toward her, drawn inexorably by the promise of a future he couldn't yet comprehend. Her eyes softened, though they retained their celestial depth, and she withdrew her hand, letting it fall gracefully to her side. The moment passed, leaving behind a palpable tension that lingered in the air like static electricity. She tilted her head slightly, regarding him with an expression that was neither impatient nor dismissive but rather calculating, as if weighing his reaction against some internal measure known only to her. "You hesitate," she observed, her voice tinged with mild amusement rather than frustration. "Such uncertainty is quaint." The word rolled off her tongue with a peculiar inflection, as though she found the concept both endearing and baffling. "But hesitation is not denial. I see the questions swirling within you, the doubts gnawing at your resolve. Let them come. They are inevitable." He swallowed hard, his throat dry despite the moisture-laden air. "It's not just hesitation," he replied, his voice steadier now, though still laced with unease. "It's incomprehension. You appear out of nowhere, proclaim this destiny, and expect me to simply accept it." His hands clenched into fists at his sides, knuckles whitening under the strain. "Who are you? Why me? What does any of this mean?" Her smile returned, faint but genuine, and she took another step closer, closing the gap between them once more. "Questions are natural," she said, her tone soothing yet firm. "But answers require context, and context demands patience. You seek understanding, yet understanding cannot bloom without trust." She raised a hand again, this time placing it gently on his shoulder. The touch sent a jolt through him, not painful, but electrifying, as if her very essence coursed through his veins. Trust begins with action, not words. He flinched instinctively but didn't pull away. Her grip was neither forceful nor invasive, it was steady, grounding. "What kind of action?" he asked cautiously, his voice barely above a whisper. "Walk with me," she said simply, lowering her hand and taking a small step backward. Not as a pledge or commitment, but as a gesture, a willingness to explore what lies beyond your doubts. She extended her hand toward him again, palm open and inviting. "There is much to show you, much to share. Worlds you have never dreamed of, truths that defy your comprehension. But none of it can be revealed unless you take the first step." The offer hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. He glanced down at her outstretched hand, then back up at her face. Her expression remained serene, unwavering, as though she had all the time in the universe to wait for his decision. And perhaps she did. The thought unsettled him further, reminding him of the vast gulf between them, the chasm of knowledge, power, and experience that separated her from his frail, human existence. Yet, paradoxically, her calm persistence also reassured him. There was no malice in her demeanor, no coercion beyond the gentle insistence of her presence. She wasn't forcing him into anything, she was extending an invitation, one that carried risks but also promises. Promises of discovery, of purpose, of something greater than the hollow emptiness that had defined his life thus far. His gaze flickered to the horizon, where the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the drama unfolding below. For so long, he had wandered aimlessly, chasing shadows and whispers of meaning that always slipped through his fingers. Now, here stood a being who claimed to hold answers, who offered not just companionship but transformation. Could he afford to turn away? Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out and placed his hand in hers. Her fingers closed around his, cool and firm, and a surge of energy coursed through him, lighting up nerve endings he hadn't realized were dormant. It wasn't unpleasant, merely overwhelming, a flood of sensations that left him momentarily breathless. "Good," she said, her smile widening ever so slightly. "Now, let us begin." With that, she turned and started walking, her strides confident and unhurried. He followed, his steps faltering at first but gradually finding rhythm alongside hers. As they moved, the terrain around them shifted subtly, the barren sands giving way to patches of luminous flora that pulsed softly with inner light. Strange shapes loomed in the distance, structures half hidden by veils of mist that shimmered like liquid rainbows. They walked in silence for a time, the only sounds their footsteps and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures retreating into the shadows. Despite the surreal beauty surrounding him, his mind churned with questions, each one vying for attention. Who was she, truly? What did she want from him? Where were they going? And most importantly, why had she chosen him? Finally, unable to contain his thoughts any longer, he spoke. "If I'm to walk with you, shouldn't I at least know your name?" She paused mid-stride, turning to face him with an expression that bordered on bemusement. Names are constructs of language, labels assigned by cultures bound by convention. To name myself would be to confine me, to reduce the infinite to the finite. Her gaze softened, becoming almost apologetic. "But for your sake, I shall adopt a title you may use. Call me Saris." "Saris," he repeated, testing the syllables on his tongue. The name felt foreign yet fitting, rolling off his lips with an elegance that matched her presence. "And you already know mine?" "I know many things," she replied cryptically, resuming their journey. "Some I have learned through observation, others through intuition. Your identity is but one thread in the tapestry of knowledge I possess." She glanced at him sidelong, her eyes twinkling with faint amusement. "But tell me, wanderer, what name do you wish to reclaim? Or shall I continue to address you as you?" He hesitated, the weight of the question settling heavily on his shoulders. His name, his real name, had been buried alongside the fragments of his past, discarded when he chose to sever ties with everything familiar. To utter it now felt like reopening old wounds, confronting ghosts he had long since fled. Yet, standing beside her, enveloped by her radiant presence, he felt an inexplicable urge to reclaim a piece of himself. Kale, he said quietly, the word emerging like a whisper torn from the depths of memory. My name is Kale. Kale, Saris echoed, savoring the sound as though committing it to memory. A name steeped in history, rich with resonance. It suits you, though perhaps not fully. Names evolve, as do those who bear them. Perhaps in time, you will find a new title that better reflects the path ahead. He nodded absently, his mind still grappling with the implications of her words. Path ahead. The phrase echoed ominously, conjuring images of challenges and transformations he couldn't yet fathom. Yet, as daunting as the prospect was, it also sparked a flicker of excitement, a yearning to uncover the mysteries she hinted at, to step beyond the confines of his limited existence. Their surroundings continued to shift, morphing into landscapes that defied logic and imagination. Towering crystalline formations jutted skyward, refracting starlight into dazzling displays of color. Rivers of molten gold snaked through valleys, their surfaces rippling with currents that seemed alive. Creatures unlike anything Kale had ever seen flitted through the air, their translucent wings casting prismatic shadows on the ground below. This is just the beginning, Saris remarked, her voice tinged with pride. Each world holds its own wonders, its own secrets. Together, we will traverse them, uncovering truths that reshape not only your understanding but the very fabric of reality itself. Her words sent a shiver down his spine, equal parts exhilaration and dread. Reality itself. The scope of what she proposed was staggering, almost incomprehensible. Yet, as they walked hand in hand through realms that defied description, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that he was exactly where he was meant to be. As they ventured deeper into the alien landscape, Kale's senses were overwhelmed by the symphony of sights and sounds that surrounded them. The crystalline spires sang softly, their harmonious vibrations resonating with the rhythm of his heartbeat. Streams of iridescent particles drifted lazily through the air, brushing against his skin like whispers of silk. Each step revealed new marvels, bioluminescent blooms unfurling in slow motion, releasing clouds of glittering pollen that spiraled upward like miniature galaxies. Even the ground beneath his feet seemed alive, pulsing faintly with a warmth that radiated through his soles and up his legs, as if the planet itself welcomed his presence. Despite the awe-inspiring beauty around him, Kale couldn't ignore the creeping unease that lingered at the edges of his consciousness. Everything here felt too perfect, too orchestrated, as though he had stumbled into a dream crafted specifically for him. He glanced at Saris, whose serene expression betrayed no hint of doubt or hesitation. Her confidence was unwavering, but it did little to quell the storm brewing within him. Was this all real? Or was he caught in some elaborate illusion, spun by powers he couldn't begin to comprehend? Why me? He blurted out suddenly, breaking the meditative silence between them. The question had been gnawing at him since their encounter began, festering like an open wound. Out of all the beings in the universe, why did you choose someone like me? Saris slowed her pace, turning to face him fully. Her eyes, those infinite pools of swirling galaxies, softened with something akin to compassion. Because you are untethered, she replied, her voice carrying a weight that made his chest tighten. Most beings are bound by obligations, by families, ambitions, fears. Their paths are predetermined, carved by circumstance and expectation. But you are free. Free in a way few others can claim. Her words struck a chord deep within him, stirring memories of the life he had left behind. He thought of the people he had known, the responsibilities he had shed, the chains he had deliberately broken. Freedom had been his goal, his sanctuary. Yet hearing her describe it now, he wondered if she saw something more profound in his choices, something he had never considered. But freedom isn't enough, he countered, his voice rising slightly. Being free doesn't mean I'm capable of whatever it is you're asking me to do. I'm just a man. An ordinary man. Ordinary. Saris laughed softly, the sound musical yet tinged with irony. You think yourself ordinary because you lack titles, achievements, or legacies. Kale, ordinariness is a construct of perspective. What makes one extraordinary is not what they achieve but how they adapt, grow, and embrace change. You have survived where others would have faltered. That resilience, that adaptability, it is rare. Her praise should have comforted him, but instead, it only deepened his turmoil. Resilience. Adaptability. Words that sounded noble in theory but felt hollow in practice. He had endured, yes, but often out of necessity rather than strength. Was that truly enough to justify her faith in him? And what exactly am I supposed to adapt to? He pressed, his tone edged with frustration. You talk about reshaping destinies and forging legacies, but you haven't explained what any of that entails. What do you want from me, Saris? Am I just a tool? A companion? Or something else entirely? Her expression darkened briefly, a flicker of emotion crossing her features before vanishing like ripples on water. For the first time, Cale detected a crack in her otherwise flawless composure. You are not a tool, she said firmly, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Nor are you merely a companion. You are a partner, a catalyst. Together, we will create something unprecedented, something that transcends the limitations of both our worlds. The gravity of her statement hit him like a tidal wave, leaving him breathless. Partner. Catalyst. The words reverberated through his mind, each syllable heavy with implication. He wanted to believe her, to trust in the vision she painted with such conviction. But belief required surrender, a relinquishing of control that terrified him. I don't even know what I'm agreeing to, he admitted, his voice trembling. How can I commit to something I don't understand? Saris stepped closer, her presence enveloping him like a warm embrace. Understanding comes with time, she said gently. Commitment begins with trust. Do you trust me, Cale? Her question hung in the air, piercing through the cacophony of doubts and fears that clouded his thoughts. Trust. It was a simple word, yet it carried monumental weight. Could he trust her? Could he place his faith in a being who embodied everything he had spent years running from? Connection, obligation, destiny? He looked into her eyes, searching for answers in their kaleidoscopic depths. What he found there was not certainty, but possibility. Possibility laced with danger, wonder, and the promise of transformation. Slowly, reluctantly, he nodded. I'll try. Her smile returned, radiant and triumphant. That is all I ask, for now. Taking his hand once more, she guided him forward, leading him toward a towering archway of shimmering crystal that materialized ahead. Beyond it lay a vista unlike anything he had seen before, a sprawling cityscape suspended in midair, its structures woven from threads of light and shadow. This is the threshold, Saris murmured, her voice brimming with anticipation. Beyond lies the next chapter of your journey. Are you ready? Cale hesitated, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. Ready? No. Willing, maybe. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. Lead the way, he said finally, his voice steadier than he expected. With a nod, Saris stepped through the archway, pulling him along with her. As they crossed the threshold, the world dissolved around them, dissolving into a kaleidoscope of colors and sensations that overwhelmed his senses. When the chaos subsided, they stood in a realm unlike any he had encountered, a place where time seemed fluid, where past, present, and future intertwined in dizzying patterns. And standing before them was a figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing with an eerie, malevolent light. You've brought him, the figure rasped, its voice echoing like thunder. Then the prophecy is true. Cale's blood ran cold. Prophecy. The word sent a jolt of fear coursing through him, rooting him to the spot. What prophecy? What role did he play in this unfolding drama? Before he could ask, Saris tightened her grip on his hand, her touch grounding him amidst the mounting uncertainty. There is much you must learn, she whispered, her voice urgent yet reassuring. But know this, whatever happens, I will stand by you. The figure cloaked in darkness stepped forward, its form shifting unnaturally as though it existed between dimensions. The air around them grew heavy, charged with an oppressive energy that made Cale's skin crawl. He instinctively moved closer to Saris, seeking solace in her unwavering presence, but even her touch couldn't dispel the dread pooling in his chest. You have meddled where you do not belong, the shadowy being rasped, its glowing eyes piercing through the haze of uncertainty. The threads of fate are delicate, and your interference threatens to unravel all. Saris stood firm, her posture unyielding despite the palpable tension. "Fate is not a chain to bind us," she countered, her voice ringing with authority. "It is a tapestry woven by choice and consequence. Your prophecy is but one thread, a possibility, not inevitability." Cale watched the exchange, his mind racing to keep up. Prophecy. Threads of fate. None of this aligned with anything he understood about reality. Yet here he was, standing at the center of what felt like a cosmic crossroads, caught between two forces whose power dwarfed his comprehension. "What prophecy?" Cale demanded, his voice louder than he intended. Both figures turned their attention to him, though for vastly different reasons. The shadow regarded him with disdain, while Ceres offered a look of quiet encouragement. "The prophecy speaks of a union," the shadow intoned, its words dripping with malice. "A joining of mortal and immortal, flesh and essence, chaos and order. From this union will rise a force capable of reshaping existence itself, either as salvation or destruction." Cale's breath hitched. Salvation or destruction. The weight of those possibilities pressed down on him, threatening to crush his resolve. He glanced at Ceres, searching for reassurance, but her expression remained inscrutable. "And you believe I'm part of this prophecy?" he asked, incredulity coloring his tone. "Not belief," the shadow corrected sharply. "Certainty. You were chosen long before you drew your first breath, marked by stars unseen and guided by hands unknown. She," it gestured toward Ceres, "has merely fulfilled the conditions set forth. Chosen. Marked. Guided." Each word landed like a blow, shattering the fragile illusion of control he had clung to. His life, his choices, his freedom, all reduced to pieces on a celestial chessboard. Anger flared within him, hot and consuming. "So I'm just a pawn in some cosmic game," he spat, his voice trembling with fury. "Is that why you sought me out, Ceres? Because I fit some grand design?" Ceres met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "No," she said firmly. "I sought you because I saw potential. Not obligation, but opportunity. The prophecy exists, yes, but its outcome is not fixed. We shape our destinies, Cale, even when the odds seem insurmountable." Her words struck a chord deep within him, reigniting the flicker of defiance that had always driven him forward. Perhaps he hadn't chosen this path, but neither would he let it define him entirely. If destiny was a tapestry, then he would weave his own pattern into it. The shadow laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or humor. "Brave words from a fragile creature," it sneered. "But bravery alone cannot withstand inevitability. You will fail, and the consequences will ripple across eternity." Cale clenched his fists, his anger morphing into something sharper, resolve. "Maybe," he conceded. "But I won't go down without fighting. Whatever happens next, I choose my own role." For the first time since their encounter began, Ceres smiled fully, her radiant features lighting up the dim expanse. "Then we stand together," she declared, stepping beside him. Her hand found his once more, their fingers intertwining with a strength born of mutual trust. The shadow recoiled slightly, its glowing eyes narrowing. "You defy fate at great cost," it warned. "But very well. Let us see how far courage can carry you." With that, the figure dissolved into the ether, leaving behind a void that pulsed with latent energy. The world around them shifted again, morphing into a battlefield of fractured landscapes and swirling storms. Lightning crackled overhead, illuminating jagged cliffs and rivers of molten fire. In the distance, armies of ethereal beings clashed, their forms shimmering like mirages. "This is the crucible," Ceres explained, her voice steady despite the chaos. "A place where realities converge and conflicts are resolved. Here, we must face the culmination of the prophecy, and decide its ultimate course." Cale nodded grimly, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "Tell me what I need to do." She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him amidst the maelstrom. "Stay true to yourself," she urged. "Trust in your instincts, and remember, no matter the outcome, you are more than the sum of any prophecy." Together, they advanced into the fray, their steps synchronized as if guided by an invisible current. Around them, the battle raged, each clash of light and shadow echoing like thunder. Strange entities circled them, testing their defenses with probing tendrils of energy. But Kale and Ceres moved as one, their combined strength creating a barrier that repelled every assault. As they neared the heart of the crucible, a towering monolith emerged from the chaos, its surface etched with runes that pulsed with ancient power. At its base stood another figure, a being of pure light, its radiance so intense it seemed to burn away the surrounding darkness. "You have come far," the luminous entity intoned, its voice resonant and calm. "But the final trial awaits. To reshape destiny, you must confront the truth within yourselves." Kale hesitated, glancing at Ceres. What truth? Her expression softened, tinged with vulnerability. "That which we fear most," she admitted. "Our doubts, our regrets, our limitations. Only by facing them can we transcend them." Before he could respond, the ground beneath them split open, revealing a chasm that stretched endlessly downward. From its depths rose images, fragmented memories, haunting visions, whispered fears. Kale saw glimpses of his past failures, moments of weakness, and the faces of those he had left behind. Each image cut deeper than the last, forcing him to confront the parts of himself he had tried so desperately to forget. Beside him, Ceres faced her own trials, her perfect facade cracking under the weight of revelation. He caught flashes of her history, a millennia-spanning journey marked by loss, sacrifice, and an unyielding pursuit of purpose. For the first time, he saw her not as an otherworldly being but as someone burdened by her own struggles. "We can't fight these," Kale realized aloud, his voice raw with emotion. "We have to accept them." Ceres nodded, tears glistening in her celestial eyes. "Acceptance is the key," she agreed. "Only then can we move beyond." Hand in hand, they descended into the chasm, allowing the torrent of emotions to wash over them. It was agonizing, cathartic, and ultimately liberating. As they reached the bottom, the visions faded, replaced by a serene stillness that enveloped them like a cocoon. When they emerged, the crucible had transformed. The storm had subsided, leaving behind a tranquil expanse bathed in golden light. The monolith now glowed softly, its runes rearranged into a new pattern, one of harmony and balance. "You have done it," the luminous entity proclaimed, its tone reverent. "Destiny has been rewritten, shaped by the courage to embrace truth and the bond forged in adversity." Kale turned to Ceres, his heart swelling with gratitude and admiration. "We did it," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. She smiled, her beauty transcendent. "Together, we always will." And as they stood there, united against the vastness of the universe, Kale finally understood. Destiny wasn't something imposed upon them, it was something they created, moment by moment, choice by choice. Together, they had claimed their place in the cosmos, not as pawns or tools, but as architects of their own future. The story didn't end there, it simply began anew, with infinite possibilities stretching before them like stars in an endless sky.